You are listening to
PackersTalk.com. This Green Bay Packers podcast is brought to you by Mayfield Sports Marketing, our official sports marketing agent for player appearances. To book a Packers player for your next event, go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances. Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Card.
If the Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.
Amanda, come in.
10-4.
Have you infiltrated the security system yet?
Locked and loaded. Ready to lower myself into the enemy war room.
I'm lowering you down now.
I have access. The Packers are in for a tough one this week. I need the password to proceed.
The password is read option.
I hate that password.
Me too. You know which wires to cut.
Always go for the green and gold. Here we go. I'm Amanda Geffre.
And I'm Chris Callaway, and you're going with us behind enemy lines. Welcome to another week of Packers football and Behind Enemy Lines, a podcast hosted through PackersTalk.com. You can find us on iTunes at PackersTalk.com as well as on Twitter at EnemyLinesGB. I'm one of the hosts, Chris Callaway, on Twitter at CCallaway33, and I'm joined as always by my dear friend and fellow owner Amanda, who you can find on Twitter at Amanda R. Geffre. The Packers head to the nation's capital for a playoff date with the Washington Redskins. Are we celebrating the playoffs? What's your mood right now as we look forward to the game this weekend?
Yay! I mean, it's good. We're still playing. There's a lot of teams who aren't anymore.
Okay.
Like the Chicago Bears.
The Chicago Bears are not
better.
currently playing in the playoffs, so
That makes everything better.
So you take your pleasure from other people's pain?
Right now, yes, because it wasn't exactly a great game to watch on Sunday or Monday. Sunday night. Jeez.
It was Sunday.
Full work week thing is got me all messed up. Sunday night wasn't a fun game.
Were you as checked into that Sunday night game? Like, I was not nearly as emotionally invested in that game as I was the other 15 or the other 100 in my life that I've watched.
Right? I think it's just, yeah, I don't know. I didn't have a good feeling going into it. Obviously, last week I predicted them to lose anyways, but I don't know. It didn't feel like we were going in the right direction. And right from the start, it felt that way as well. And so it was just kind of like, the game's on.
Yeah, and I made the poor
ahead.
life choice of being friends with a lot of Vikings fans. So
Yeah, that is a poor life choice.
yeah, and after the game, my Facebook feed was filled with, rule the North, NFC North champion, woohoo, go Viking stuff. And I'm like, well, okay, like if it were the other way and the Packers would have won, I don't think there would have been that many people flooding social media, gloating that much that, yeah, we're division champions. Okay, great. Like, we're both still in the playoffs, and I don't know. It just maybe it's,
and we would have been playing them, right?
Right,
That's
and
what
it's a spoiled Packer fan thing to say, but okay, division champion, sure, it's nice, but we're still basically in the same spot this weekend.
Right. Yeah. Nope, we are. And I mean, last time we won the Super Bowl, we didn't win the division title.
No, we did not.
But I don't necessarily feel as confident as I did back in 2010.
That is an accurate assessment. What is your confidence level then? I mean, do you give them any chance of? Are we going to have a podcast next week? I mean, what's your feeling on the game?
My feeling is not. I don't know. And this is going to be one of those things where people are like, "You are not a true fan. You are not a real fan." I don't even feel like watching it. And I think it's just because, this team just doesn't seem to have the emotional connection to the game. They keep talking every week, well, we're going to do this better. Or, I'm going to be really good this week. I'm going to have the best game ever. And it never happens. I don't know. I'm just kind of over it.
Like there's this magical switch that they're supposedly going to flip at some point?
Yeah, and it seems like at least in all the interviews they're all talking the talk, but it's like you're never seeing them actually perform. And not saying that it's always one person's fault or that they're not trying to mean well, but it's like, can we just at least be honest and talk about the issues that we have? And clearly they don't want to do that with the public eye, and whatever, that's their choice, but it's kind of has me checked out. Is that bad to say? Like,
well, no, I mean,
like a bad fan.
I think we've admitted all season long that there's a little bit of the spoiled nature that's certainly crept into our psyche surrounding this team. But, I mean, it's not the Packers team that you've been accustomed to cheering for over the past couple of seasons. And so, I do my fair share of bitching and moaning, but I still watch the games. So,
right. I'm going to watch it. It's not like I'm not going to watch it. I just don't.
You're not as
like
excited.
Super pumped. Yeah.
Right.
Like, I don't know. Well, and you know what? Disclaimer for any Redskins fans who are listening to this podcast. I'm sorry, because this is really exciting for you guys, and like we sound like jerks.
Kinda.
Yeah.
But the fact that we can point that out makes it better, right?
Now you're really being a jerk.
Makes me feel better about myself. Well, let's come back to the Packers. What has you feeling most down, or what is the leading cause of your blah feeling?
Definitely the passing game.
Okay.
You know, it's not like our running game's super awesome or near what I think it should be, but I just feel like it's not as bad as the passing game.
Yeah.
It seems like Aaron Rodgers and the receivers are just not making that connection that we're so, like you said, we're so accustomed to. What do you think?
Well, I think that it's easy to say that, people need to step up, people need to make the jump, people need to embrace a bigger role in the offense, and, you think that people are just going to naturally get better from one year to the next, and that doesn't happen. I mean, it's not a given that that's necessarily going to happen. Randall Cobb having his worst year. Devontae Adams not making that jump. Sure, James Jones has looked good at times, but he also disappears off the face of the earth at times as well. And you just assume that, you look at the team, okay, Jordy Nelson goes down, next man up. They're going to be able to fill that void, but it just hasn't happened. And, it's easy to assume that and, write that in a story and give that quote to the media. But in all honesty, it hasn't been the case. So it's frustrating that, an injury in the preseason kind of put the limitation on what this team can do. But I know some people say that's a cop-out, but it's really hard to not look at the injury report and be like, what could this team be like? And every team has their injuries, but it feels like the injury bug biting the Packers just maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, it was tough watching our offensive line last week. It's not even, you might say it was worse against the Cardinals, but it was like, I don't know. I feel like it just keeps, they're just plagued. I don't know.
Right. 53 people on the roster, and I think on Thursday, 18 of them were on the injury report. That's one out of every 3 players has some sort of injury that, has them on the injury report. Probably they'll have bumps and bruises and whatnot, but it's tough to think of this team as a legit Super Bowl contender with, so many people needing the infirmary more than, the film room.
Right. And it's not going to be an easy road.
No. I mean, I'm a little bit more confident in you this weekend with the Packers playing on the road against the Redskins. I know a lot of people kind of overlooking the Redskins, but I actually think they match up pretty well, and we'll talk to our guest about that coming up in a little bit. But after that, there was nothing in the previous games against Carolina or Arizona that really led me to believe that we could go back on the road and beat those teams there. So that's what's waiting next weekend if they get through Washington. So I don't know. I'm optimistic this weekend, but after that, I kind of come back down to your level.
Right. I do take some consolation in the fact that the Vikings probably won't make it beyond next week either.
Okay. So that's something. The whole NFC North is going to be sitting at home, is what you're saying.
I don't know. We'll see. That's kind of how I feel, though.
Okay. Well, it's possible. It's certainly possible that it's just going to be playoffs for us to watch after this weekend. So I don't really know much else what to say other than trying to learn a little bit more about the Redskins.
Yeah, I think we need to talk to an expert and maybe find out, hey, Texans have a good chance, or are we going to say bye-bye to the playoffs?
Well, let's do that now.
Now we'd like to welcome our guest, Michael Phillips, to the show. Michael covers the Washington Redskins for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. You can find his work and follow him on Twitter at MichaelPRTB. Welcome to the show, Michael. We're happy to have you on.
Great to be here, and hey, playoff week, we don't get that too often around here. It's a lot of excitement.
Yeah, you tweeted something out earlier today or yesterday that 10 years since they've won their last playoff game.
Just incredible, and not only that, this will only be the third playoff game at FedEx Field, their stadium. It opened in 1997, so just a huge drought. Some of the older fans, of course, will remember the Redskins Super Bowl teams and the Hogs and kind of that dynasty and perennial league power, but that has not been the case recently, and ever since Dan Snyder, the owner, bought the team, they have been content to finish second or third most years. It's been a good year for them, so a rare playoff appearance and one everybody's looking forward to.
Well, one of the things that we like to do every week is kind of go back to your mindset at the beginning of the season. I know the majority of the people, at least it seems like, kind of wrote off this team from the get-go, third or fourth in the NFC East. And so going back to your thinking at the beginning of the season, what did you expect from this team?
Yeah, we don't even have to go that far. They were 2-4 and laid a stinker in New York against the Jets. So that was kind of about where everybody's mindset was 6 weeks into the year. I think the most crucial point, you look back, the third preseason game right after it, Coach Jay Gruden, he benched RG3, Robert Griffin III, and put in Kirk Cousins as a starting quarterback. It was not a unanimous decision by any sense and not a popular decision with a lot of folks, but Jay stood by his guns. He said, this is the guy we need to lead our team. I think a lot of us felt 6 wins, 7 wins would be kind of that respectability factor that they've been coming off 3-win and 4-win seasons. So just getting back to that middle of the pack would be, a successful season for this group, getting away from some of the issues they'd had. And, they're 2-4. Cousins has had a bad game, and there were a lot of calls to go back to Griffin. And Gruden stood by his guns, and ever since then, he's been rolling. He's rattled off some great performances and has really validated that decision.
Well, I mean, they finished the regular season on the right note, having won their past 4 games to get to 9-7. Is there a specific time you can point to as when people kind of had to step back and say, whoa, watch out for the Redskins? Like, when did that happen?
Yeah, and you would say it was incredibly late in the year because the NFC East was such a mess this year. All 4 teams were still in the playoff picture pretty late. The first time was going into a Monday Night Football game against Dallas. That was about a month ago. It was the first game in December. And if the Redskins had won that game against Dallas Monday night at home, Cowboys were struggling, they would have been in the driver's seat in the NFC East. And so a lot of people got fired up for that one, big game, et cetera. And the Redskins laid an egg and did not win. That was the one where Deshaun Jackson fumbled a punt when he was trying to make extra yardage at the end of the game. And the Cowboys eventually got a field goal to win. It was just one of the more incredible mental blunders to see live, quite the way to end the game. So even coming out of that game in early December, you say, well, no, they're not seizing control of this thing. And then they go into Philadelphia 2 weeks ago for a Saturday night game the day after Christmas. And that one was the second opportunity to kind of knock the Eagles out and take control of this thing. And, just because of where they are, 9-7, and the way the division was this year was, it's a bad division. I don't think anybody believed in this team until that Philly win really sealed the deal.
Well, let's get into Kirk Cousins a little bit more. You mentioned what happened in the preseason, and he finally got the opportunity to start consistently for the whole season, 16 starts. How did that stability factor, him being now the guy, translate into his success this season?
It's huge, and the other thing is he's finally got his full complement of receivers over the last 9 weeks when his numbers have been good. He's a guy who he is not flashy. The obvious comparison is Andy Dalton, as the other quarterback Jay Gruden's worked with, and they do work inside a similar system and kind of have similar physical abilities. So it is a fair comparison to say, a version of Andy Dalton. And that's not an insult by any stretch. Andy Dalton's playing in the playoffs this week, too. But what you'll really notice is just how Kirk Cousins uses all of his receivers. He's got a lot of great weapons. Deshaun Jackson, of course, is one of the best in the game. Tight end Jordan Reed, he's a matchup problem. Pierre Garçon is a guy a lot of people have heard of. He worked with Peyton Manning in Indianapolis. And Jamison Crowder is a rookie who's just kind of emerging on the scene. But he will use all four of them, spread the field out, and really makes the right choice most of the time. He's often said, I see myself a little bit more as the distributor, as opposed to a playmaking quarterback. And again, it's not an insult. That's what works for this team.
That matchup problem you mentioned, fantasy football players everywhere are well aware of Jordan Reed's emergence late in the season. How will Cousins and Reed be able to continue their rapport against the Packers this weekend?
Yeah, and the biggest thing for Jordan Reed was this is his third season in the league. He hadn't played more than 10 games in either of his first two seasons. He'd been hurt and just a number of injuries. Had an injury again early this season. This is the healthiest he's been. And, man, he's a beast. He's a matchup problem because you put a linebacker on him, he can outrun him. You put a safety on him, and he'll bowl him over. So you got to really figure out how you're going to defend Jordan Reed. And the teams that have done it successfully use cornerbacks and occasionally double-team him. But that's a problem for the obvious reason. You got Deshaun Jackson to worry about on the other side of the field a lot of times. So Jordan Reed is the player to watch. He's healthy. He's playing some of the best football of his career. And, when he's rolling, he's fun.
Well, what kind of balance offensively do you think that the Redskins are going to need this weekend? Do you think they're going to try to need to grind out a lot on the ground, maybe in the cold weather, or will it be big plays to Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon, and Reed, like you said, that might be the biggest factor of success for the offense?
Yeah, running game's been the big wild card this year. Alfred Morris had 3 1,000-yard seasons back-to-back in his first 3 seasons in the league. And he's really fallen off this year. They've got a new running scheme. Bill Callahan, who's bounced around the NFL, is the offensive line coach and has emphasized a little bit more of a power-based approach. And it hasn't worked for Alfred Morris. He's really been struggling. Finally got it together a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but he was a guy who they were counting on to make the big yardage. Hasn't done that. The other guy, Matt Jones, he's hurt right now with a hip injury, and just from the sounds of things on Thursday here during practice, sounds like he maybe won't be able to go on Sunday at the game. So the running game's a big, huge question mark. What they're going to do is, Chris Thompson and Pierre Thomas are their 2 third down backs, and they'll kind of spread them out, try to get some screen passes, some looks in space. But this is an offense that's probably going to need to throw the ball 30, 35 times to win the game.
So looking at the Packers offense a little bit, Aaron Rodgers has looked very human under pressure this season, which is a change from years past. Ryan Kerrigan and Preston Smith lead the team in sacks, but who are you looking at defensively at being hopefully a thorn in Rodgers' side this weekend?
Yeah, I think Preston Smith's the first guy you're looking at. He's a rookie. He was highly touted. Another guy struggles early in the season, has really put it together late. And that's kind of the story of a lot of these guys. It's the anti-Packers in a way. They started 6-0. The Redskins have finished 4-0. So, one team hot early in the year, and then this team, of course, hot late in the year. Preston Smith's been a big reason for that with his pass rush pressure. I'd expect to see a lot of Jason Hatcher, former Cowboys player. He's been hurt the last few weeks, but he took last week off, and he says he's back to good condition, and he was able to practice fully. So I think he'll be a factor as well. Well, one of the fascinating things, you play a team like the Packers, and kind of the mystique goes before them. So, even though it's down season for Aaron Rodgers, everybody's still talking up the plays he can make and the plays he has made in the playoffs. So there's a very, very healthy respect for what they'll be up against.
Well, one of the stories in the news this week was the addition of Kerry Williams in the secondary. And at this juncture in the season, it's certainly interesting. But what is his, bringing him into the fold, what does that tell you about the way Washington might approach Green Bay defensively?
Yeah, it's a desperation play. Can't spin it any other way than that. And, Kerry Williams, he's a guy who, to be totally blunt, doesn't have a great reputation around the league, has some dirty plays under his belt. But he's what was available right now, and they had another injury in the secondary last week. it's been their most depleted group all year. One of their starting cornerbacks, Will Blackman, was not on the team in week 1. So it's a position where they've really had to go deep, and now so deep that they're grabbing the first guy they can find off the street to plug him in for this game. I think in an ideal world they would rather not lean on him, but if they do, he's got that physical, chippy style, and this is a team that does not back down from a good fight or a good scrap. They've gotten their fair share of personal foul penalties, so he'll fit right in. And if that's the way they feel they can beat the Packers, by maybe showing that they're not intimidated or making that tough talk early, then he'll be the addition for that. I don't love it, but when you're desperate, you're desperate.
Deshaun Goldson is another guy who was brought in relatively late in the process. What has his presence meant to the defense?
Yeah, and he's the starting safety, and it's a position where they've really struggled to find somebody the last few years. They got Ryan Clark from the Steelers last year after Pittsburgh passed on him, and he was mostly a disappointment. He's an ESPN analyst now. They haven't had that stability there. Deshaun Goldson had great seasons in San Francisco, Pro Bowl seasons there. Signed a big money free agent deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and had 2 pretty uninspiring seasons there. And so the Buccaneers just wanted to unload the last few years of his contract, so they traded him to the Redskins essentially for nothing, just to take the contract off their hands. And sure enough, he's found a little bit of a career revival. I wouldn't say his performance has been great or Pro Bowl caliber, but he's been exactly what Washington needs, which is a steady presence back there for 16 games. So for the Redskins, he's been perfect, and for him, it's been perfect, reviving his career a little bit and kind of erasing a little bit of the stain of those Tampa Bay days. But this is a weak secondary. That's the area where the Packers will have to win the game, because you get back there, and they've given up some big plays this year. They've struggled with tackling this year. You're watching the Packers, it seems to be a similar team. That the tackling's just not as crisp as perhaps you would expect it to be at the NFL level. So it's a very, very vulnerable point. I think the pass rush is much farther ahead in the secondary and the rebuilding efforts around here.
Well, I'm not sure the Packers have had that many big plays this season, so it might be a wash in that regard. But one guy we haven't mentioned too much is Jay Gruden. He's really worked his way off the hot seat this season. What are your impressions of him after 2 years on the job?
Yeah, he's a really unorthodox guy. And the last 2 coaches here were Joe Gibbs, who was a retread. He won the Super Bowls here and was kind of brought back to bring some stability during some pretty chaotic days around here. And then after that, Mike Shanahan, and those are both drill sergeant guys cut from that cloth of authoritative football coaches. And that's not Jay. And Jay is what they call him. He's not Coach. He's not Coach Gruden. He's Jay, and he's one of the guys in the locker room. And he really does things his own way. We've got a story about that at Richmond.com about how, he stands by his guns. He's not a drill sergeant out there with them. He's very player-friendly. He gives them days off when they need days off, and the players have really responded to that. It's not the best approach for all teams, and I don't think it's the best approach for last year's team, but with a lot of veterans brought in this year who can kind of police themselves, it's been a really good mix.
Well, Michael, what are your thoughts on playoffs as a whole, particularly in the NFC? I mean, does the winner of this game on Sunday stand a chance against Carolina or Arizona next weekend?
Yeah, my hunch is no. Just to give the quick and blunt answer, those 2 are kind of the class of the league right now, and I think the Seahawks are really good too. I think they're surging, and they're going to look a lot better with Marshawn Lynch back for sure. But boy, Packers played both the teams this year. Redskins only played Carolina, but just watching them as a crisp, efficient football team. Haven't seen anything in recent weeks to tell me otherwise. So I think this will be the prize for these 2 teams is a win this weekend, and I think they'll be sacrificed up to a better team next weekend. That's my hunch. At the NFL, anything can happen. But, boy, just watching those 2, they're playing at such a high level right now.
I think Amanda and I are in agreement with you there that this could be the final rodeo for both teams this weekend. But how do you see this game playing out, and what maybe do you see being the biggest factor in determining the end result?
Yeah, I think early on the Redskins have been so good on their first plays. They call them the first 15, those 15 plays that are scripted out early in games, and they've scored touchdowns on each of their first 2 drives in the last few games, and that's been a big help for them going up big, and I don't see any reason they can't do that this weekend. The offense is clicking, it's rolling at a high level. Now, on the flip side, in the second half, their secondary has really worn down and has been susceptible to big plays. as you mentioned, that the Packers don't have them, and the tape vouches for that, they've struggled to make those game-winning drives when they need to. I think that's what this is going to come down to. Can Aaron Rodgers deliver in the second half when he's weak in the defense? I think they'll get the opportunity, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Redskins take an early lead and the Packers have to win it late.
So do you think this will be a high-scoring game, or do you see it more of a low-scoring, maybe some field goal kicks in there? What's your score range, Michael?
Yeah, it's fascinating. My score prediction in Sunday's newspaper is going to be 28-27 Redskins. That's kind of a score that says I'm not really sure what's going on. I think both teams are going to score, but I'm not entirely sure. I think both teams are capable of scoring. They've both shown their flaws this year, and like all NFL games, I think this one's going to be lost, not won. I think it'll be a mistake or two that swings this.
Oh, well, I don't know that it's going to be that high scoring, but who knows?
You got
like
the low
scoring. Anything can happen. I feel like we're going to see a few more field goals in this game. I'm going to have to agree with you and say the Redskins are going to come out on top. What do you think, Chris?
I guess I'm just thinking of this from a Packers perspective. They've toyed with us so much over these 16 games so far. I think they're going to come out and take care of business this week, only to lose by 40 next week. So I've felt like this feels like a game where it's like a 31-17 game for the Packers. I might be delusional in thinking that, but I think that they're going to be able to pull it together just enough, suck us in before they let us down next weekend. So I think the Redskins are good, but I think the Packers at their peak are probably a little bit better.
One of us has to be optimistic, I guess.
we picked the whole spectrum there, so somebody will get bragging rights on Monday.
Right, exactly. Oh, man, but we'll just have to wait until Sunday to figure out what is going to happen. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. You gave us some great stuff to talk about.
You bet, my pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Michael.
All right, take care, guys.
We appreciate everyone for tuning in to what Amanda thinks will be the final edition of Behind Enemy Lines this season. The Packers will take on the Redskins in the nation's capital this Sunday. Once again, you can find our podcast on Twitter at EnemyLinesGB. I'm Chris Callaway, and you can find me at CCallaway33.
And I'm Amanda Geffre. You can find me at Amanda R. Geffre. Thank you to our guest, Michael Phillips, for joining us. You can find him on Twitter at MichaelPRTD. Remember, check out all of our podcasts on PackersTalk.com and follow Behind Enemy Lines on Twitter at EnemyLinesGB. Until next time, go Pack, go!
This Green Bay Packers podcast is brought to you by Mayfield Sports Marketing, our official sports marketing agent for player appearances. To book a Packers player for your next event, go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances. Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Card.
If a Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.